A 51-year-old Chinese woman named Zhang tried to defy the laws of physics. She was working at a garment factory in Taizhou when two of her colleagues decided to take a dangerous risk. They loaded 52 metal sheets weighing 4 tons onto a forklift, fully aware they were exceeding the weight limit by half a ton. So, to outsmart gravity, the worker sat on the back of the forklift to counterbalance the weight, but he obviously didn't weigh 500 kilograms. As a result, the forklift tipped forward, lifting its rear wheels off the ground. The next 15 seconds were the last of Zhang's life. Still, her tragic story is just the first in a series of eerie ways to lose one's life at the workplace. So, viewer discretion is advised. Breaking the laws of physics is definitely risky, but creating the illusion that you've bent them is a different story. I'm talking about the sponsor of this video, Mova Globes, whose globes seem to spin on their own. In fact, they're powered by hidden magnets which activate when the globe is exposed to light. No need for charging, wires, or batteries. Aside from various styles of Earth maps, the Mova Globes collection also includes famous works of art and images of other planets and moons created using graphics from NASA. You could even assemble your own mini solar system. And with the promo code ECHOES, you'll get 10% off your order. Just follow the link in the description and safely defy the laws of physics. Now, let's dive into some terrifying incidents that have happened to people at work. It was 1:47 p.m. when Zhang reflexively rushed to help her colleagues, foolishly hoping to stop the vehicle with her bare hands. Yet the laws of physics are unyielding. When Zhang was lifted off the ground, she lost her grip and fell under the forklift. At that moment, the metal sheets slipped and the rear wheels came crashing down directly on her. To make matters worse, the panicked driver hit the gas, pulling Zhang even further under the machine. It was still 1:47 p.m. and only 15 seconds had passed. Factory workers couldn't free Zhang from the trap, and when rescuers arrived, all they could do was confirm her death. This tragedy could have been avoided if the workers had used the forklift properly. Conscious disregard for safety rules is one of the leading causes of workplace deaths. However, the consequences don't always fall on those who break the rules. The first thing 21-year-old Day Davis did at his new job was snap a photo and send it to his fiancée. Not long before, they had lost their newborn daughter, a tragedy that pushed Davis, who had a reputation for slacking off, to turn his life around. At 2 p.m. on August 16, 2012, Davis reported to work at Rum Factory No. 7 in Jacksonville, Florida. He had taken a temporary job there for modest pay, but he was proud. It was his first day at his first ever job after graduating. Davis worked on a palletizer, a machine that packs and stacks cases of filled bottles onto a pallet. They roll down the line, get compressed into a square, and then the platform lowers the completed pallet. Sometimes, though, the bottles would collide and break, covering the conveyor with glass and sticky rum. This had been happening for years, yet no one seemed to care, except for the palletizer operators, who had to stop the machine and clean it manually. That day was no different. The operators halted the conveyor, and at 4:46 p.m., Davis ducked underneath it to clean up the glass. Workers were afraid of delaying production, so they did everything as quickly as possible, even if it meant compromising their own safety. After shutting down the machine, they were supposed to lock it to prevent it from being turned back on. Then, they were meant to place special supports under the platform to ensure it couldn't lower while someone was underneath. However, this time, the workers didn't do any of this to avoid wasting precious minutes. So, when the supervisor and operator finished cleaning the conveyor above Davis, they closed the gates and restarted the machine. It was exactly 4:49 p.m. when the factory was pierced by David's scream, as he was crushed by cases of bottles weighing over 900 kilograms. Rescuers arrived within minutes, but Davis was already gone. Had the factory owners fixed the palletizer and not forced workers into situations where they feared taking time for their own safety, this wouldn't have happened. Nor would the many other accidents involving temporary workers in the U.S., who face a significantly higher risk of injury on the job than full-time ones. In Florida, this rate is 50% higher, in Oregon, 66%, and in Minnesota, a staggering 72%. However, other workers who have worked with their equipment for a long time and with great success often become so confident in their abilities that they simply disregard safety rules. This happened at a snack factory in the Chinese city of Dalian. It was 5 p.m. on June 27, 2022. A man, whose identity remains unknown, was working near a lathe. He spent less than a minute prepping the machine, and only after pressing the start button did he realize his fatal mistake. But it was too late. The man was pulled into the lathe, spinning at a terrifying speed for a full 10 seconds, until his colleagues shut down the machine. They were horrified by what they saw because, despite the gruesome injuries, the man was still breathing. It sounds unbelievable, yet doctors managed to save the guy, and he survived. Now, another worker wasn't so lucky in the winter of 2019. He was working with metal near a similar machine, dressed in protective gear, but for some reason he didn't bother to follow another safety rule. Instead of walking around the lathe to turn it on, the man leaned over the spindle to do it. At that moment, a part of his protective clothing got caught in the machine, dragging him right in after. Within seconds, his agony was over, and he passed away on the spot. Accidents like these are so common that it's worth reminding everyone about the importance of following all safety rules when working with equipment, especially machinery with fast-moving parts. However, in the Indian city of Surat, a textile factory worker was tinkering around a spinning machine wearing just jeans and a t-shirt. His job was to control the speed and tension of the threads winding onto a spool. It seemed like nothing dangerous. Suddenly, his hand got tangled in one of the threads, and he was instantly wrapped around the giant spool. His body twisted and cocooned in threads like a spider's web. This nightmare lasted about 7 seconds before the spool finally stopped. Other workers rushed over to free their colleague from the trap. They cut the threads and carefully laid him on the ground, afraid that every move could worsen his condition. They probably remembered the warning from the president of the Federation of Weavers' Welfare Associations that an accident involving a spinning machine almost always means certain death. This time, though, a miracle happened. The man calmly stood up and dusted himself off, suffering only a few bruises. Well, if he had been working with a paper machine, like the person in the next story, he wouldn't have had even a slim chance of survival. I don't know the worker's name or the exact location of where this video was filmed, but the footage is dated June 22, 2023 at 8:55 a.m. Two workers were at a factory near a roller press, feeding paper strips onto it. This massive metal cylinder spins rapidly, just 10 centimeters above the floor. When a wide strip of paper fell off the conveyor, one worker simply tossed it back onto the roller, but suddenly, he was also pulled into the machine. His body was dragged down until it vanished into the 10-centimeter gap under the press. Panic erupted. Workers tried to rescue the poor man, but it took them a full minute to stop the roller. Perhaps they didn't know how to shut down the machine in an emergency, or maybe the necessary button was too far away, or even inaccessible to them. In any case, the violation of safety rules claimed yet another life. Such irresponsibility causes suffering for people worldwide and in all kinds of jobs. For example, what could possibly be dangerous on a ship that is already docked in port? In reality, that's when one of the deadliest incidents can happen. You've probably never heard of a Snapback Zone, but the crews of large vessels have special markings and signs warning about this area. This man, who was mooring a ship on February 9, 2021, should have been aware of it. He was using a large winch to wind one of the ropes holding the ship at the dock. Yet when a thicker section of the rope appeared on the screen, it suddenly tightened and, within a second, snapped back with such force that it struck the man by the winch like a giant whip. Dangerous spots on the deck, where the ends of a broken rope can fly, are called snapback zones. Many tragedies have occurred in these zones before markings were introduced. Unfortunately, the man in this video either didn't know the rules or chose to ignore them. But how badly he was injured remains unknown. On another ship, crew members were also working with mooring lines. One of them was performing some task near the chain connecting two sections of the rope. And just as the workers signaled to someone off camera and stepped back from the rope, it snapped. The exact consequences of this incident are also unknown, but I suspect it didn't end without a trip to the hospital. Let's hope all these sailors are all alive, because some people get lucky even in the worst circumstances. On September 2, 1990, the streets of Vancouver, Canada witnessed the first ever city-hosted race of the championship auto racing teams. Local driver Ross Bentley finished last in the standings, but still qualified. He started the race and was performing well until the 16th lap, when his car stalled on one of the winding turns. A group of marshals immediately rushed to push Bentley's car off the track. As soon as the vehicle regained traction, the marshals hurried back to their posts. However, at that very moment, Willie T. Ribbs' car came around the corner, scattering 4 people. Only 22-year-old Jean-Patrick Hein was struck directly by the car. He lay unconscious on the track, surrounded by his colleagues, yet the race was not stopped. Hein was taken to the hospital, but he died that same day. Due to the barriers, Ribbs couldn't see the marshals in time, especially at such speed. Ironically, this race marked Ribbs' best performance in the championship. Perhaps the marshals made a catastrophic mistake. Or maybe in 1990, racing rules weren't as strict as today. Or it's just that cars are inherently dangerous, even those with a top speed of only 30 kilometers per hour. Although the warehouse worker featured in this video probably didn't think that way until July 2017. At first, everything seemed normal. The driver was slowly moving between 2 tall shelves on a forklift. Meanwhile, other workers were inspecting boxes that stood neatly in the middle of the aisle. And as the driver approached them, a catastrophe occurred, often dramatized in movies. The driver swerved to avoid the obstacle when suddenly the shelf collapsed. A cascade of boxes pushed the forklift across the aisle, burying it under the contents of the second shelf, which also collapsed. Then the warehouse section began falling one by one, creating a terrifying yet spectacular domino effect. And this wasn't a movie, it was real life. The collapse only stopped after a significant portion of the warehouse had come down. It's unclear where this disaster happened, or if the forklift driver survived. But it seems the fault doesn't lie with the worker. If all it took to bring down half the warehouse was a barely noticeable touch of the forklift roof to a box, then the problem likely lies in the weak construction of the shelves. On March 27, 2024, there were chilling reports about the Vandapak factory in Thailand's Chonburi province. At 4:47 a.m., surveillance footage shows 2 workers calmly working in a shop. Suddenly, a robotic arm lowered directly onto one of them, pinning him to the bench where he had just placed a metal sheet. The man didn't even have time to scream, so his colleague had no idea about the horror happening right behind him. The injured worker was eventually freed from the trap, but couldn't be saved. The factory administration claimed the robot was functioning correctly, yet the man had ducked under it at the wrong time. And according to the managers, all employees assumed responsibility for any workplace accidents. In reality, though, this is an unfair shifting of responsibility. The robotic arm should have been equipped with a signal warning of its activation, and the worker's area should have been made as safe as possible, because this wasn't the only factory where such incidents occurred. On similar production lines, the approach to human-robot cooperation is sometimes so irresponsible that machines can take down entire groups of workers in seconds. One of the victims of robots was 49-year-old Mr. Cho, who worked at a porcelain factory in China's Hunan province in 2018. During his shift, a robotic arm on the production line broke and fell. His body was instantly pierced by numerous massive metal rods. There were 10 of them, each 30 centimeters long and 12 millimeters thick. Since most of the rods entered his shoulder, the man survived. However, when the injured worker was brought to the hospital, problems arose. Due to the metal foreign bodies, doctors couldn't perform an X-ray or MRI and had to operate blindly. It turned out that one of the rods nearly hit an artery, passing just 1/10 of a millimeter from it. Surgeons worked all night and managed to save Cho's life. Details about how and why the accident happened are unknown, but it's evident that the safety protocols at this porcelain factory need improvement. A year earlier, another Chinese resident, Yang Ming, found himself in a similar situation at a construction site. During his shift, the 37-year-old worker made a typical but fatal mistake. He accidentally touched exposed wires. However, the shock threw him directly onto a 120-centimeter metal rod, which passed through Ming's body like a knife through butter. The shocked but conscious man was taken to the hospital, where it became clear just how lucky he was. The rod miraculously missed all vital organs, only slightly grazing the intestines, bladder, pancreas, liver, and lungs, without causing any bleeding. Ming was still conscious when he was taken in for a 7-hour surgery. The surgeons removed the rod from his body, but still, he had a long road to recovery. And while none of us can predict or avoid every possible threat, everyone should take care of their safety and demand the same from their employer. So, stay safe and come back to my channel for more thrilling and helpful content.